I woke before sunrise to a silence that felt wrong, so complete it seemed to vibrate against the walls. My mother's room was always the first place I checked in the morning, partly out of habit, partly out of fear that age might steal her away while I slept. She was 92, fragile in body but stubborn in spirit, the kind of woman who still insisted on brushing her own hair even when her hands trembled. But when I opened her door that morning, the air changed. The bed was perfectly made, the blanket folded, her pillow untouched, as though she had never laid her head there at all. What struck me hardest wasn't her absence, it was the presence of everything she relied on. Her wheelchair sat in its usual place near the dresser. Her handbag rested atop the side table, straps neatly aligned. Even her medication, which she never skipped, was still arranged in its weekly container. Nothing suggested she had prepared to leave, and certainly nothing hinted she could have done so on her own. I called her name once, then twice. By the third call, my voice sounded foreign, thinner, scraped raw by rising panic. Footsteps approached behind me, unhurried, as if none of this carried weight. My son George leaned against the doorway with an expression that didn't match the alarm tightening my chest. "Dad, relax," he said, brushing invisible lint from his sleeve. "She's at a friend's house. Tiffany arranged it." His tone was too casual, his explanation too rehearsed. A friend? My mother hadn't left the house in weeks. Tiffany, his girlfriend, barely knew her. And no one had consulted me, though I lived under the same roof and cared for her daily. I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the story, but he merely crossed his arms as if the matter were closed. The room felt smaller with him standing there, the air heavier, the truth dissolving somewhere between us. "George," I said slowly, choosing each word with care, "she can't go anywhere without assistance. Her wheelchair is right here." He shrugged. "People help. You're overthinking." But his eyes flicked away from mine, betraying a strain beneath the nonchalance, a tightening around the jaw, a flicker of something close to impatience. I had seen that expression before, usually when he was trying to conceal a mistake or manipulate the narrative in his favor. The silence between us stretched, filled with everything neither of us dared say outright. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and his refusal to acknowledge the obvious only sharpened my suspicions. I took one more sweeping look around the room. The untouched blanket, the waiting slippers, the glass of water still full beside the lamp. My mother hadn't left this house willingly. That much was unmistakable. I stepped back into the hallway, my voice low but steady. "George, where is she really?" He didn't answer, and the doorway between us suddenly felt like the threshold into a much darker truth. George didn't respond to my question, at least not in words. Instead, he pushed past me as though the conversation were finished, heading toward the kitchen with a heavy, deliberate stride. That avoidance alone deepened the dread tightening in my chest. My son had always been skilled at sidestepping accountability, but this silence felt different, calculated, almost rehearsed. I followed him, unwilling to let the matter drop. "George," I said again, sharper this time, "I asked you where she is." He opened the refrigerator, retrieving a bottle of water with exaggerated calm. "Dad, I told you already. She's safe. Tiffany said the place is quiet, private. Good for her nerves." Nerves? My mother hadn't once complained about nerves. Pain, yes. Fatigue, occasionally. But never anxiety. His explanation didn't just sound flimsy, it sounded invented. As he drank, I studied him more closely. His jaw twitched. His shoulders were unnaturally rigid, tension radiating through every movement. Even the way he avoided eye contact felt like a confession he didn't want to speak aloud. Before I could press further, Ethan walked in from the back door. He froze when he saw us, his eyes darting between me and his brother like someone who had accidentally stepped into an argument already at a breaking point. "Morning," he said softly, but the tremor in his voice betrayed that he knew something. I turned to him with a steadier tone than I felt. "Ethan, have you seen your grandmother? Do you know where she is?" His reaction was immediate and telling. His shoulders sank, and his gaze dropped to the floor. George said she wanted a few days away, he murmured. A nursing home trial. Just to see if she liked it there. My stomach twisted. A nursing home? She never agreed to that. Ethan flinched. I thought you knew. I didn't. My voice came out low, controlled only by force of will. Who moved her? You. A beat of silence stretched between us. Then he shook his head.
No.
I only helped bring her things to the porch. George said the rest was handled.
The rest.
Handled. The words echoed ominously in my mind. George set the water bottle down with a thud. Dad, you're blowing this out of proportion. Tiffany's got connections. She found a place that would take her last minute. Mom needed a change. And you didn't think to ask me?
I asked.
He finally met my eyes, and in that brief connection, I saw it. Fear disguised as irritation. A flicker of guilt. A truth he was scrambling to bury. Ethan shifted closer to me, almost instinctively seeking distance from his brother. Dad, I think something's wrong, he whispered. That quiet admission, spoken by the son who rarely disagreed with anyone, snapped something open inside me. The unease that had been simmering now surged into certainty. Something was happening behind my back. Something deliberate. Something dangerous. I straightened, my voice firm. Both of you, listen carefully. I'm going to find out exactly where your grandmother is. And if either of you knows more than you're saying, now is the time to tell me. The room fell silent. And in that silence, the truth began to pulse, dark, thick, and waiting to surface. Ethan's confession didn't unravel the mystery. It tightened it. His uncertainty, his stammered words, his glances toward George for silent reassurance all hinted at a deeper manipulation. Whatever had happened, Ethan had been drawn into it without fully understanding what he was part of. And George, well, George was suddenly far too invested in ending the conversation. I'm done talking about this, he snapped, grabbing his keys from the counter. You're turning something simple into a crisis. He moved toward the front door, but I blocked his path. You're not leaving until you tell me where she is. His jaw clenched. Move. No. The single syllable hung between us like a challenge neither of us could retreat from. George's expression hardened, but beneath the bravado I saw flickers of what I'd missed earlier. Fear, frustration, and a desperation that made my skin crawl. Something had gone wrong. Something he no longer knew how to control. Ethan took a cautious step closer, his voice wavering. George, maybe we should just explain. Dad's right. None of this feels quiet, George hissed without looking at him. That one word, sharp, commanding, made Ethan's mouth snap shut, and my heart sank. Whatever hold George had over him wasn't just emotional. It was coercive, controlling, and undeniably dangerous. I reached for my phone, not to call the police yet, but to call Linda. She had always known more about my mother's routines, fears, and habits than either of my sons. If anyone could confirm whether this nursing home trial had been planned, it was her. But when I dialed, her phone went straight to voicemail again. A warning bell rang in my mind. Linda was reliable. She answered even during her breaks. The silence on her end felt as ominous as my mother's empty room. I lowered the phone slowly. You fired her, didn't you? George didn't deny it this time. He only exhaled sharply, as if caught in a minor inconvenience rather than the center of a crisis. She was in the way. The words knocked the breath out of me. In the way. A caregiver who had devoted 2 years to my mother was dismissed, as though she were an obstacle. That wasn't just callous, it was purposeful. Ethan's eyes widened. George, you said she quit. George ignored him. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Whatever this was, scheme, plan, or something more sinister, George had orchestrated it with precision. And if he was willing to fire the one person who safeguarded my mother daily, then he had crossed a line he couldn't step back from. My voice came out low, steady, edged with resolve. If you don't tell me where she is, I'm going to the police. George's keys stilled in his hand. His eyes flicked toward me, then toward Ethan, then toward the door. For the first time all morning, I saw panic break through his facade. And in that instant I knew my mother wasn't resting anywhere. She wasn't safe. And whatever George had done, we had only uncovered the first layer. I didn't want to involve the police. Not yet. I needed facts, not assumptions, and the hollow ache in my chest demanded proof before escalation. So I went searching for it the only place I hadn't checked. The neighbors. Mrs. Halden lived directly across from us, a woman in her 80s with sharper instincts than most people half her age. Her curtains were always parted just enough to keep an eye on the street. If anyone had seen something, it would be her. When she opened her door, her expression shifted immediately. "Robert? What's wrong? You look pale." "I can't find my mother," I said, the words tasting strange, unreal. "Did you see her leave yesterday? With anyone?" Her brows knitted. "Leave?"
No.
"She doesn't go out much anymore, does she?" "No," I whispered. "She doesn't." Something in my voice made her step aside. "Come in." I followed her into the living room, my pulse thudding in my ears. She gestured toward her small writing desk where a laptop sat open. "My security camera picks up everything on the street. Maybe it recorded something." Hope and dread tangled inside me as she clicked through the footage. Hours scrolled by in silence. Delivery trucks, passing cars, a stray cat darting across the yard. Then at 2:17 a.m., movement. A van, old, dark, unfamiliar, pulled up in front of my house. I leaned closer. My throat tightened. Two figures stepped out. One tall, one shorter. They moved quickly, glancing up and down the street before heading toward my gate. The angle made their faces blurry, but their silhouettes were unmistakable.
George.
And Tiffany. My breath caught. I felt the world tilt, the truth screaming into place. We watched as a third man, Tony, a friend of George's, appeared from the side of the house, pushing a wheelchair. My mother was slumped in it, her small frame half covered with a blanket. She wasn't awake. Mrs. Halden gasped softly. "Oh heavens!" I didn't speak. I couldn't. The video showed them lifting her into the van, handling her with a cold efficiency that made my legs tremble. No tenderness. No hesitation. Just a brutal, practical removal. The van door slid shut. At 2:19 a.m., they drove away. I stood there long after the footage ended, my hands numb, my heart beating in a slow, stunned rhythm. Knowing the truth didn't ease the fear, it magnified it. They hadn't taken her to a nursing home. They hadn't taken her to a friend's house. They'd taken her somewhere secret, somewhere hidden, and I had no idea if she was alive, conscious, or in pain. Mrs. Halden touched my arm gently. "You need to call the authorities, Robert. This isn't a misunderstanding." I nodded, though the motion felt detached from my body. The line between fear and fury sharpened inside me until it felt like a blade. I now had proof. But what I didn't have, what terrified me most, was time. Morning light crept across the living room floor, but Daniel barely noticed it. He sat rigidly at the edge of the couch, replaying the previous night's revelations like a broken reel. Every detail, his father's trembling voice, the unspoken history, the unresolved betrayal, circled him like restless shadows. He had come home seeking answers, but instead he had uncovered a truth that threatened to unravel everything he believed about his family. Across the room, his father, Robert, stood near the window. His posture, usually firm, disciplined, seemed slightly bent, as though burdened by years of secrets he had finally started to release. He clasped his hands behind his back, a habit he kept whenever he felt afraid of saying too much. Daniel noticed it and realized, with a strange ache, that his father was scared of him, scared of being misunderstood, of being judged, of being seen after decades of concealing the truth. "Dad," Daniel finally said, breaking the silence. "You told me what happened, but you didn't tell me why." Robert's jaw tightened. He inhaled slowly, gathering the courage to confront a memory he had buried so deeply he had almost convinced himself it never existed. "I thought I was protecting you," Robert said. His voice was steady but wounded. "Back then, I didn't have the strength to face the consequences. I chose denial over accountability, and over time, that choice grew into a prison I couldn't escape. Daniel felt a cold pressure in his chest. His father's words were sincere, but sincerity didn't erase the years of absence, the broken promises, the silence that had shaped so much of his youth. "You should have trusted me," Daniel murmured. "I know," Robert replied, "and that's my failure, not yours." The simplicity of the admission unsettled Daniel. His father had always been a man who fought for control, rarely acknowledging fault. Hearing him say it now gave Daniel the faintest glimpse of the man beneath the armor, flawed, frightened, and desperately trying to repair what had been broken. A soft knock on the door cut through the tension. Both men turned. Daniel frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" Robert shook his head. The knock came again, firmer this time. Daniel's instinct sharpened. He crossed the room and opened the door just enough to see the person on the other side. A woman stood there, her expression tense, her eyes fixed with purpose. She looked at Daniel, then passed him toward Robert.
"We need to talk," she said.
"All three of us." Daniel felt the air thicken. He didn't know her, but the familiarity in her tone suggested a deeper connection, one that neither he nor his father was prepared to confront. Robert's face strained of color. "Daniel," he whispered, "this is where everything changes." The woman stepped inside, closing the door behind her. And in that moment, Daniel understood. Whatever truth he thought he had uncovered was only the beginning.